អង្គុយចុះ
Please be seated. The court is now in session. Today, the chamber continues to hear the testimony of the expert Vurna Butti, who will be questioned by the defense team for Keo Sampon. And after that, we will hear the response by the defense team for Keo Sampon to the rebuttal by the co-prosecutors to the key documents presentation by the defense team for Keo Sampon in relation to the role of the accused. Mr. Amhoy, please report the attendance of the parties and other individuals to today's proceedings. Grazie, Mr. President. For today's proceedings, all parties to this case are present. Mr. Pik Aung, the national lead co-lawyer for civil parties, is absent for personal reason. Mr. Nuon Chea is present in the holding cell downstairs. He has waived his rights to be present in the courtroom. The waiver has been delivered to the greffier. The expert who is to conclude his testimony today, that is Mr. Vurna Butti, is present in the courtroom. Thank you. President, thank you, Mr. Amhoy. The Chamber now decides on the request by Nuon Chea. The Chamber has received a waiver from Nuon Chea, dated 10 January 2017, which states that due to his health, that is headache, back pain, he cannot sit or concentrate for long, and in order to effectively participate in future hearings, he requests to waive his rights to be present at the 10 January 2017 hearing. Having seen the medical report of Nuon Chea by the duty doctor for the accused at the ECCC, dated 10 January 2017, which notes that today Nuon Chea has a constant lower back pain when he sits for long, and recommends that the Chamber shall grant him his request so that he can follow the proceedings remotely from the holding cell downstairs. Based on the above information and pursuant to Rule 81(5) of the ECCC internal rules, the Chamber grants Nuon Chea his request to follow today's proceedings remotely from the holding cell downstairs via an audio-visual means. The Chamber instructs the AV unit personnel to link the proceedings to the room downstairs so that Nuon Chea can follow. That applies for the whole day. And before I hand the floor to the defense team for Keo Sampon, the Chamber would like to issue an oral ruling on the confession of Chum Mei. In relation to the color version of Chum Mei's confession, the Chamber has considered the parties' oral submissions made on 4 January 2016. The Keo Sampon defense point out that another copy of this document, albeit in black and white rather than color, is in evidence as E3/9253. In the circumstances, and having reviewed both the black and white and color versions, the Chamber concludes that this is not a document where the color version reveals anything additional or different from the black and white version. None of the parties has contested this. However, the Chamber notes that the color version provides a better quality copy, closer to the original. The Chamber therefore decides that it is unnecessary to admit the color version as a new document, but will add it to the current Khmer version of E3/9253 as E3/9253A. The Chamber now hands the floor to the defense team for Keo Sampon to put the questions to the expert, Mr. Vurna Butti.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning. Good morning to all of you. I have some additional questions in addition to the testimony you've already given for this chamber. I will try to ask very precise questions. I would also like you to respond very precisely to my questions in so much as possible. My first question, according to your CV, your training, in responding to the President, you told us that you participated in a training at the University of Hawaii. I have your CV here, E3/10678, and here is what I see according to your training, and I'll read in English.
Skill of fauna remain analysis and human bone conservation, University of Hawaii, Department of Anthropology. Dans l'intitulé de...
In the header of this information, I understand that you understood bone formation and other topics as well. Did I understand that correctly?
But
The statement that you made is correct regarding my training at the Hawaii University. I engage in 3 tasks simultaneously, that is the analysis of animals, of fish, and of human.
De la lecture de votre...
From reading your CV, I also understand that in 2010-2011, and perhaps you can specify how many months you spent studying at the University of Hawaii, this was the first time in the context of this training that you worked with human bones. Did I understand that correctly?
But
in between 2010 and 2011, I studied at Hawaii University for 10 months. However, as for the forensic bone analysis, that was not the first time that I worked on it. In fact, I studied the forensic analysis of human bone from a station that is Pre-Khmer district, that is pre-Angkor area, and it was from the West Barai in the Angkor Wat.
alors,
So, I'm a bit simple, so perhaps I'll be asking you some simplistic questions, or they may seem simplistic to you. So, when you were working as a forensic doctor, was there a difference between the forensic medicine among those who were working on cadavers that had not yet been preserved for a murder, etc., or the forensic medicine practice when there are only bones available?
but
Thank you for your question. The difference between the forensic analysis of the victims of violence or crime from the analysis of forensic analysis of corpses from the prehistory era, that we had to do comparison for the forensic analysis of those corpses of the prehistory era in order to find marks on the bones. And we had to study the context of how the ceremony was held for the dead bodies, and whether those dead bodies died as a result of diseases or of elderly age, or whether the person was killed. Then we had to study the offering that was put nearby the dead bodies, and that would indicate the practice of culture and tradition of the people during that particular period of time. Then it would lead us to the understanding of the surrounding environment of that particular location. As for the forensic analysis of the victims, we focus on three main points. How, first, that is how they were killed. Second, why they were brought to that particular location to be killed. And third, we had to show the evidence that we found and whether they were linked through the outside context.
Dans votre première...
In your first description, when you talked about the bones and the rites for interring skeletons, etc., I understand that there's a bit of an anthropological view. My question was more practical than that. When you're studying bones and when you're studying a cadaver with human tissue and blood, etc., is there a difference in the tools you use in forensic medicine? So my question very clearly is, with the training that you received, can you perform forensic medicine on a recent cadaver, for example, or are those completely different methods that you studied?
I do not fully get your question. Please rephrase it.
Je recommence, je vais peut-être essayer.
I'll start over. Perhaps I'll try to simplify it. Are we in agreement that you, in your specialty in forensic medicine, and specifically concerning bones, that that's it, but you didn't study how to analyze human tissue and blood and for a recent cadaver? Are we in agreement on that, or am I mistaken?
I will try to respond to your question because it is not that fully clear to me regarding the forensic analysis of fossil or bones from the prehistory era, because there was no blood for us to study. And again, for the victims' forensic analysis, we did not have any blood to analyze.
I'll try to reword my question one last time to try to be clearer, and then I'll move on to something else. We are in agreement that in the context of your training, what you studied was only bones in forensic medicine. You did not study anything but bones. Did I understand your training correctly?
Allow me to respond to your question regarding my training on bone analysis. We studied them in three parts regarding those cadavers. First, we focus on the anatomy of each individual. Second, as I indicated earlier, we study the cause of death, that is the medical nature of it. For example, what would be the bone structure like if the person was killed by an object, or whether the person was poisoned. And the third point is that whether the person was disabled or was injured before he or she died. And that is the primary focus on the those who studied the forensic analysis of bones, and that is different from the medical study by doctors.
Je voudrais maintenant passer.
I would now like to move to something else that you spoke about in the context of your deposition. On the 14th of December 2016, you said that at Chang'an there was a sort of wild excavation carried out by those who were living in the area who were looking for gold or clothing or something else of value. So this was in the hearing of 14 December 2016. You mentioned this. And you said that this period of informal excavation, not by experts, took place between 81 and 83. Is that correct?
But
Yes, that is correct. And allow me to add a bit more. Not only they were trying to look for gold, but they were trying to look for pieces of clothes or hammocks as well, so that they could use them. Because at that time people were very poor, so they tried to find whatever they could, including gold, silver, or clothes and hammocks.
Et cette information.
And this information on the fact that this type of excavation took place, how did you receive this information?
The information that we obtained was from three sources. That is first from witnesses who used to work in that location, namely Mr. Ning Sai. Then we studied a document produced by the Office of Culture and Propaganda of the Kandal province. Then we had other documents and documentary at Chương 8.
Vous évoquez un documentaire.
You talk about documentation, and you spoke of it several times during your testimony. Could you, in fact, you're talking about a documentary film. Can you tell us who made that documentary film and which documentary film is this?
The documentary film was about the inauguration of the current stupa to store bones. They spoke about the context surrounding the skulls and the skeletal remains of the victims, and I reviewed that documentary film, though I cannot recall its title. My review of the film at the time was about the skeleton remains, and if you want, you can contact Chương 8 site for the film.
Une dernière précision sur ce film.
Just one last clarification on this film. It was a documentary that the Office of Propaganda and Culture filmed, is that correct?
Regarding the documentary film, I am not sure whether it was produced by the Ministry of Culture and Propaganda or the Office of the Culture and Propaganda. However, I think it was the Ministry of Culture and Propaganda who produced it during the 1980s, So it was produced by the state at the time.
J'en reviens maintenant à...
Now we'll come back to this period of 80 through 83 where you said there were these informal excavations. Does this mean that there were also manipulations of the remains of bones by normal civilians, and that you don't know how these bones remains were manipulated?
Thank you, and I'd like to frankly say that I did not witness it personally. However, I conducted my study and analysis based on the available information in the photos. In particular, we questioned the survivors who witnessed it. And the excavation at the time is similar to the sketch that I hold in my hand. This is a sketch depicted based on the information that we received from the survivor. And there are also some photos which are being maintained at the Tuslang archives. You could see the depiction of the excavation activity and those who engage in the excavation.
Un point particulier que vous...
A particular point that you also brought up in your December testimony was that you talked about the excavation work carried out by the Vietnamese, and my question is, how did you hear about these Vietnamese excavations, and do you have any written information on how these excavations were carried out?
I think maybe you misunderstand me. I never said Vietnamese came to excavate. I spoke about the Vietnamese medical team who came to cleanse the bone and to analyze the bones.
D'accord, j'ai dû...
All right, perhaps I presented something poorly. So you talked about a Vietnamese team who came to clean and analyze bones. So what period did they come in, and how did you hear about their activities?
It was during the late 1980s, that is around 1987 or 88. That is before the bones were stored in the stupa. A Vietnamese medical team came to clean the bones or to count those bones. And that was when Vietnamese was present at the site. However, I saw some documentary videos depicting the Vietnamese experts or advisors who came to examine the marks on the bones at the pit, but they themselves did not engage in the excavation activity. And the Vietnamese medical team went to the area in around late 1987. That is based on some 3 or 4 documentary films that I reviewed.
Et ces films documentaires?
So did you see these documentary films at Chiang Ek, or where did you see them? And my second question, is there any written record of this work carried out by the Vietnamese, and were you able to consult it?
I have indicated that I did not miss the Vietnamese medical team. As for the forensic report produced by the Vietnamese medical team, we did not have access to it. We tried to contact the Vietnamese medical team in Vietnam, but we did not receive anything. Rather, they wanted documents from us, and they did not have that document in their possession. As for the documentary films, I viewed them at the Chiang Ai site, and I actually reviewed some documents there as well as the documentary films at the Chiang Ai.
Vous avez indiqué que
You said that you attempted to contact this medical team. Do you know what type of medicine they were practicing and which entity they were part of in Vietnam?
As I have stated, I went to the area rather at a later stage, and when I questioned the survivors there, including Mr. Nguyen Sai and Madame Tet Kim, they could not know the identity of the Vietnamese medical team. They only knew that they came to count the bones, and sometimes they had to clean the bones before they started counting them. And also I would like to add that previously I said that the team came to wash, to clean and to count the bones, and they also told the site that 15 years later the Chiang Ai site had to engage in the process again in order to avoid bones from being decayed.
There's something that I didn't quite understand. When you say that you attempted to contact these doctors in Vietnam, what measures did you take out? Who did you appeal to? Since you didn't have the names of these doctors, what steps did you undertake in order to try to find out the information on this team?
It is easy for me to respond to your question. Before we engage in the preservation project, we established a committee involving the ministry down to the center itself. At that time, we have Excellency Prat Sinara, who was the advisory chairman and the overall chairman, and he was invited by the Vietnamese side to visit a Vietnamese party's museum in Vietnam. So he contacted the Vietnamese side to ask for the document or report made by the Vietnamese team in order to clarify whether they came to conduct a forensic analysis or they only came to count the bones. And I personally did not know as to which person he contacted. I understand that he questioned many sections in Vietnam, but none of them failed to respond to his questions.
D'accord, je voudrais maintenant passer.
Very well. I'd like us to talk about the technical aspect of your work now. There is something that as a layperson I do not understand, so I'm trying to understand from a scientific standpoint how you do your work. When you analyze a skeleton that you find, is there a means of establishing, on the basis of the analysis of the skeleton, the death, the date of the death of a person?
Thank you. And when, how, a person died, I have already told you, we did not have the budgets to conduct the C14 compound analysis or DNA analysis. These are the methods that we could establish how old the person is. In our preservation projects, we were not able to conduct such analysis because of the budget constraint. What we did at the time was to establish whether or not those victims died during the Pol Pot's time. And that was the main task of the preservation team. As I indicated, the bones came with DTT element or mud. That mud or the element could be analyzed, and then we could find out how the person died.
Alors,
Very well. My question was a bit more focused on what you're referring to from a scientific standpoint. If a skeleton is buried at a certain location at a point in time and it is moved to another place, do you have the means scientifically to determine whether that skeleton was relocated? Can you just deduce from the analysis of the ground where the person is buried that the person was buried initially at that location? So to be more specific, apart from being able to say that the skeleton was unearthed at a particular location, does that necessarily mean that that person was buried there, that the person was killed there? Do you scientifically have the means of determining that?
Thank you very much for asking me about the approaches or technical methods that I use. As an analyst, I conducted the research or survey also on the levels of the soil. That is why I made a request to conduct the survey or analysis on the soil or pits that was used to bury the victims. I have not yet found any evidence showing that the victims were exhumed and then reburied. We could conduct the research on that. I would like to bring an example. If a victim was buried at Krang Dachan and then exhumed and reburied at Cheung Aek, I would like to explain you that there are means that we can know. We can examine the mud in the small holes of the bones. That is one way we conducted our research. And another point, the soil is different from one place to another. If a victim died at Cheung Aek, the bones, the whole small holes in the bones would be filled with DRT powder or elements. So I conducted the analysis on the mud. I conducted the analysis in relation to the mud on the bone. I have informed judges already that we were very careful in conducting the analysis.
Est-ce que vous pouvez expliquer
Can you explain what is DOT? What do you mean by that?
បាទជំរាបលើកមុនដែរហើយ
That is a kind of poison used by the Khmer Rouge in order to get rid of the bad smell. That powder can be used to kill the insects. This is a chemical element or powders used to poison, to kill the insects. I explained to the court already that the powder was used by the Khmer Rouge for one reason. The first reason was to kill the victims. When the powder was sprayed on the killed victims, the powders can eventually kill the victim who did not yet died, and usually the reaction from the powders could make a black color on the bones.
J'ai compris que vous avez un...
I have understood that you pointed out that DDT was used at Chung Ek. My question is whether that product was only used in Chung Ek or it was used all over Cambodia. In any case, around Phnom Penh, for purposes of killing insects and for other purposes. Do you know whether that product was used only in Chung Ek?
I, at the time, did not reside close to Chung Ai area, and I myself do not know whether the product was used in other places. I went to conduct the excavation. I went to conduct the research at the site, and I went to conduct the analysis whether the DDT powders was similar to the one used by the Khmer Rouge. In fact, the powder was used sometimes to kill the insects in order to make the vegetables grow well. And I cannot give you my response whether or not the DDT powder was used in other locations. President, Mr. Wuti, could you please identify or label the number for the document you used? And I will contact the greffier which number or sequential number you could use. You could now resume your questioning, counsel.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just one question regarding the product you have just referred to. Do you know whether that product was also used after 1979? Generally speaking, whether we are talking of Chung Ek or around Phnom Penh or elsewhere in Cambodia, was it a product that was reused after the Democratic Kampuchea regime?
The DDT product regarding this product. I do not know whether or not it is being used after the Democratic Cambodia. I heard that the DTT powder was a scarce resource and could hardly found for using. And again, I do not know whether or not it is being used after the Democratic Cambodia.
Une autre question pour rebondir sur...
Another question, as a follow-up to an answer you gave earlier. You stated that if a skeleton is exhumed at Krang Tacham and subsequently buried in Chung Ek, there's a means of knowing by looking at the interior of the bones or the mud from which it's taken that it was moved from somewhere else. So my question is to find out whether if a skeleton was moved from one place to another, do you have any basis on which you can determine from this the difference between the soil from which it was exhumed and the soil where it's subsequently buried? Do you have any means of comparing the two types of soils, or just looking at soil in one place you can determine whether it was moved from one location to the other and buried in another?
Thank you. In order to find out if a skeleton was moved to another place, we had the ability to know the skeleton buried at Krang Tachan would have different evidence, would provide us with a different evidence, because we could find out based on the mud. At Chung Ek, after the analysis, there is a clear indication that the skeletons were buried there, the skeletons were not removed from other places and reburied at that location. We used also the microscope in order to zoom in the small holes on the skeletons, because we wanted to make sure that the skeletons were filled with mud from that location. We used the microscope.
Ça, j'ai compris que vous avez fait...
I have understood that you did studies using microscopes and that you would take earth from where the skeletons were exhumed and you analyze that under the microscope. My question is as follows. If you have a skeleton that was buried 20 years ago at one location and another skeleton that was buried 30 years ago, can you make a distinction between the two skeletons? For instance, can you know that one skeleton was buried much earlier than the other? Is that something that you are able to determine or not?
We are able to know because we have our methodologies or formulas to find out when the victim died. We we collected the bones and then we made a reference collection. So we would compare the bones in order to find out when the victim died. For example, at Kotria, there was a victim died 2,700 years before the BC. And at Angkor Buray, the victims were buried on top of each other, and we could find out which victim was buried first and which victim was buried later on. So we examined the context, the surrounding environment, and also the density of the bones. So we could find out clearly.
J'ai compris que il y a une question d'emploi.
I have understood that there's an issue of regarding the relocation of skeleton to determine which was buried before another. We have a case of a body buried 2,700 years before Jesus Christ and another later on. My question is whether you can make a distinction between a body buried in 1970 and another that was buried in 1980. Can you make a distinction between the two bodies buried within an interval of 10 years?
Based on the experience and the modern technology, we are able to establish that. I do not know how to explain in Khmer. We review the elements around the bones, that those elements could indicate how long the person died. This is a technical methodology. If you allow me to go and bring in my book, I am able to explain you well about the bone. If a victim died in the early year, within 1 year, we are not able to find out. There is a different methodology or way to conduct the analysis. We can conduct the C14 carbon analysis and use different technologies to identify the victim who died in a short period of time.
D'accord, mais j'ai...
Very well, but I understood from your statement at the beginning that in the case of Chung Ek, you did not have the means of using the carbon-14 technique and so on and so forth. What I would like you to tell us is whether, as regards skeletons who had already been exhumed and analyzed by the Vietnamese, do I understand that you were not able to use those techniques to analyze those skeletons? You were not able to therefore determine who died when and how. Do I understand that that is something you are not able to do as part of your studies, as part of your research?
It is not the same as what you think. I have told you already about the methodologies or techniques used by medical team. The medical team of the Vietnamese medical team did not use the modern technology. They used the baskets in order to clean the remains with water. It is true that we did not use the carbon-14 technique at the time. at Trường Ake, the experts was very sure on the remains. If there was indicia of suspicious suspicion, and then we would send the remains for further analysis. We would invite the outside experts to conduct a further analysis if there was a suspicion at the time.
Je vais vous demander de parler plus lentement.
May I request you to speak more slowly to facilitate interpretation? I would like us to talk about an issue in the analysis report on in Trường Ake E3/10643, ERN in English 012-35398, ERN in Khmer 012359491. The person who did that assessment explained that as part of the research and excavations, I'll quote in English regarding what he said as regards tools.
Like metal picks and scrapping with metal tools is not a good practice. Even if the evidence of violent trauma and other damage has already been recorded, we must think about future researchers who would examine the skulls. If metal tools leave marks on the bone, other researchers may think that some evidence of violent trauma was not recorded. End of quote. Là, je renvoie.
Here, I'll relate what you said regarding the technical research, that there was a relocation of crania and there could have been some damage of the crania. Can you explain that the manner in which the research was done? Can you say whether the way the excavations was done could have an impact on the results of the subsequent analysis of the crania?
Thank you. It is easy to respond, and everyone know how to do that. The scars or on the remains of the victims in the past and in the later periods are different from one another. For example, a victim was hit 5 times, and we cannot manipulate the evidence on the remains. The scars, as the result of the excavation by the villagers, are different from the scars of, as the result of torture, because there are scars or bruises like scars on the bones, and the mud could not go in, and the scar could the mud usually the mud usually comes with the bones, and you could see the scar as a result of the axe. So no one can manipulate the evidence.
Et une question, encore une fois, de profane.
I'm also asking this question just as a layperson. When you have a skeleton that was buried 10, 20 or 30 years ago, and you're talking of some porous bones. When you look at the substance left on the soil, is that something that you also find in the bones that you analyze?
If I understand your question correctly, you want to ask me about the acids comes with the rain. So does it have the impact on the remains? This is your question.
C'est une partie de ma question.
That is only part of my question. My question is as follows. When a skeleton is buried in a certain place, there's the fact that it was buried a long time ago, and in addition to the issue of humidity and the rain, does that have an impact on the bones or not?
Normally, there is acid in the rain, but usually the remains in the pits is not impacted by the acids. If there is water, the water is in the surface, and the acid could not go deeply in the soil. So it is rarely that the acids can have the impact on the remains. And as I said, some remains were displayed in the stupa. If the remains were displayed or kept openly, the acid rain would have a severe impact on the remains. And I, in the past, showed a picture of a remain which was impacted by the tropical weather in this area.
Another
point mentioned in the assessment report E3/10673, and the ERN in English this time is 1235390, and in Khmer 01235450. It is stated that at Chung Ek there was a collection of clothes of victims and old uniforms. My first question is as follows. What uniforms are you referring to, and can you describe them? Secondly, do you know who found those uniforms, and when were they kept at Chung Ek?
Allow me to reiterate it. I did not witness it personally. I only reviewed it through a document and photos. As for the uniform, Hung Hoi stated that after victims were killed, their clothes would be stripped off so that the clothes would be given to new prisoners. However, some clothes were not taken off the dead bodies, and through documentary film and photos, During the excavations, those clothes were removed and placed near the rim of the pits. Later on, when the bones were removed and stored at the stupa, the clothes were also collected. But a question can be put whether the clothes had all been gathered, and I can say that there still some pieces of clothes remained at the present time. So first, it was removed by those who excavated the pits, and later on by those who removed the pits to be stored at the stupa. And the question is whether those clothes and the blindfolds were that of those victims of the regime. We actually examined them, and we examined them all.
C'est un point que vous avez.
This is something that you brought up with Council Kopay in December, E3/10765. The ERN in French is 011365756, and in Khmer 013194888, and in English 013365753. In talking about finding out the types of injuries that you found on the bones, you talked about 1,686 marks caused by rifle butts and other weapons. My question is, why did you not make any kind of difference between what were firearms and what were made specifically by a rifle? Again, I'm not an expert, but I think that a mark made by a rifle butt and by a firearm would not be the same. And so I see that my time is running out quickly, so I would like you to speak as briefly and as concisely as possible in answering my question.
I don't know if this is a translation issue. The report doesn't refer to rifle butts. It refers to marks from the cleaning rod of rifles. In English, the question was translated as if the mark was from a rifle butt, which of course is very different than a cleaning rod.
Je n'ai pas la version anglaise sous les yeux.
I don't have the English version before me. I only have the French translation, and that's 1,686 marks by firearm or culasse de fusil, which I don't know what that is in English. Perhaps the expert could explain to us what those marks were.
I responded to this question 3 times already, and allow me to reiterate my response regarding marks number 8. This is marks by being fired by bullet, as well as the cleaning of rod. That is 1,686 marks, and we could not make a clear distinction or differentiation between these. In my previous response to the lead co-lawyer, for a dead body, sometimes we could observe marks of bullets and marks from a cleaning rod. That's what I said earlier. I also added that we cannot make the clear distinction because the cleaning rod does not cause a fatal injury. It only causes an injury, but it's non-fatal. And you may ask why I did not make the differentiation between the two. And I already responded to that. And maybe my response is rather too quick. Or maybe I speak too fast. Allow me to repeat. Some bodies has the marks of a bullet as well as a cleaning rod.
Oui, ça j'ai bien compris que
Yes, I understood that there were two types of marks from bullets and from a cleaning rod. So my question is, why would they be marked together in the same category, since you are apparently able to make a difference between the two?
I apologize. Maybe I speak too fast and the interpretation into French is not complete. So probably I will need to listen to both channels. President and Council, please repeat your last question that you put to the expert.
répéter la question.
Yes, I will repeat the question. We'd like to know why you lumped together in one group these two types of injuries, one by firearm or bullet, and the other by cleaning rod, because what I understood from what you said in your testimony was that you do have the capacity to make a distinction between these two types of injury.
The reason we do not make the distinction, and as I had responded earlier, is that some bones had overlapping marks. For example, there was a bullet fired from one side, and then the marks overlapped with the cleaning rod from the other side. So we had to decide whether we counted it as one or as two.
Okay. Monsieur le Président, je vois qu'il...
Mr. President, I see that it is 10:10. Unfortunately, I have not yet finished. I will finish soon. I'm trying to go as quickly as possible. I will make some cuts, but I would need another 10 minutes to finish my questioning. I haven't even brought up Prang Tachan yet, but I will go as quickly as possible. I don't think it will take very long, so I'm asking the Chamber to give me at least 10 additional minutes in order to conclude at least on Prang Tachan, or at least one point on the methodology, and then Prang Tachan. I will go as quickly as possible, Mr. President.
Yes, the Chamber allows that.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you. Another point on the document which perhaps I could provide to you in Khmer, just so it would be simpler. I don't have it in Khmer, but perhaps you'll be able to remember it in reading it. It's E3/10648. It's the first page, and all languages, and it's the table. And I would like to look at the age of the remains found, the bones found, and then I have a technical scientific question on the age ranges that you identified. And I see that there are several age groups: 8 to 19, 20 to 24, 35 to 49, and 50 to 69. So I want to ask, from a scientific level, is there not a significant difference between the bones of a person aged 8 years and one aged 19 years? And so I'm wondering why this separation was made. It's something that's frequent in the field of study of bones. Could you please clarify that for the chamber?
Regarding this summary table, we cannot include every single detail. For example, here we start the year from 3 years old up to 70 years old, and if we have to include all the age range, the table will become very extensive. So if we rather your question is that there is not much gap between the age range, although we know that there are gaps.
Excusez-moi, je suis obligée de vous interrompre.
I'm sorry, I must interrupt because I have very limited time. So my question is particularly concerning the age range 8 to 19. I was asking because for me, there's a difference between children and adolescents. So is it common to make an age range group of 8 to 19 years old? Is that explained by the way a skeleton appears and the analysis of bones? It's very specific on this point.
Regarding the inventory list, we did not use a fixed or clear figure for the age range, and the reason is that regarding the age analysis, we conducted it based on the scar lines, and that formula was used throughout the world. Let me give you an example. The scar lines that can be clearly seen, and that could be dissolved between 5 to 10 years. That is, after we could not see the line, then we can make the determination of the age range based on these skeleton lines.
Un problème de compréhension, mais
There's a problem with the understanding here, but my question is very, very specific, only talking about the age range group 8 to 19 years old. Is this an age range group that we find commonly, very regularly in your work, because there is a skeleton, the skeletons have a similarity between 8 years old and 19 years old, they're very similar in this field of study, or did you just create this age group? I need to know if there's a scientific reason for determining this specific age group, including ages 8 to 19.
I replied to your question earlier, and probably I do not know how to further explain it to you. The method that I use is well known worldwide. And for our process of the analysis for the age range that is over 10 years old, that is based on the skeleton development of human beings, that is the bone structure. For example, for the age range between 3 to 8 years old, then we know how the bones developed. For example, when a baby was born, the frontal lobe of the skull and the skull there is still soft. And from 6 months onward, it becomes solidified, while other babies would take a period of a year for it to be solidified. So we cannot put that range into the 2 years range, because at that time the line on the skull was not yet formed. President, I think the question might be different from your response. The question is about your age range categorization. That is for 8 to 19, 20 to 34, and 35 to 49. So there is a wide age range within this category, and the question is based on your methodology. Is it a well-known standard, or it is based on your own personal formula based on the actual situation at the young age? The question is the reason that you form this age range, and whether it is conformed to the international standard, or whether it should be broken into a shorter age range, for example, from 8 to 10 or 12 rather than 8 to 19. And please, there is no need for you to listen to the French interpretation. You just need a slight pause. And here the interpretation is simultaneous, so it happens almost instantaneously. Expert, I still stand by my response. This age range categorization is internationalized standard. And why the scientists adhere to this formula, and that is based on the human bones development. As bone development was according to stages of the age maturity. For example, for this certain period of age range, the bone developed to a certain level. And for example, when we reach 70 years old, those scaled lines could no longer be visible. So again, this determination is based on the bone development through stages.
J'aurais voulu approfondir, mais là...
I would like to go into more detail, but since my time is limited, I will very quickly move to Kreng Tachan to conclude. One question. In your report E3 10769, you mention a figure before talking about your scientific analysis. You talk about 17,000 persons who were ostensibly killed in Kreng Tachan, knowing, of course, that this is a figure that came from the ECCC. We think it came from Soi Sen's declaration, E3/5214, the ERN in French, 00702-901, and unfortunately I'm going to ask my team to look up the ERNs in the other languages because I forgot to note them. So Soi Sen on the 1st of September 2008 mentioned this figure, 17,000 people. And at the hearing of the 25th of March 2015, document E1/282.1, a bit after 15:20 and 45 seconds, he said that there were slightly more than 10,000 at the beginning of the exhumation of the cadavers, and he talks about more than 10,000. So this same witness initially said 17,000, and then second said 10,000. So I believe that you interrogated him during your work on Kangta Chan. Do you remember the figure that he gave you at that time? And can you remind the chamber how many bones, what were the number of bones that you found at Kangta Chan?
I conducted interviews, and based on the available documents, there were more than 10,000 victims at that site. However, throughout the process of my interviews, the figure kept changing. As for the actual bones that we analyzed 1,904. And I cannot say whether there are more bones than what we have to analyze. We could only analyze 1,904 skeleton bones.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. President, I would have many other questions to ask, but I see that it's already 10:25, and I've already pressed my luck, so I thank you for the additional time you've given me, and unfortunately I'm going to have to conclude my questioning.
You have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Councillor Guisset, you emphasized this morning that there are differences between the English and French translations, specifically on the marks by cleaning rods. If you could simply tell us in which expert reports these differences can be noted, or perhaps we could correct the translation. Councillor Guisset, well, I only worked on the French, so I didn't actually note any difference. I simply changed my vocabulary after the observation of the co-prosecutor, but the document that I noted where this issue of bullet, and in French, culasse de fusil is E3/10765, and it's number 8 in the list of injuries noted, but I personally can't tell you what the differences are. I only worked on the French.
The hearing of the testimony of the expert Bonbote is now concluded. And Mr. Expert, the Chamber is grateful of your valuable time to come and testify before this Chamber for a total period of 2 court days. That is for a certain period in December 2016, and for today's session with professional appearance. Your testimony may contribute to the ascertainment of the truth in this case, and you are no longer required to be present in the courtroom. So you may return to your residence or wherever you wish to go to, and we wish you all the very best. Court officer, please work with VISU staff to return Mr. Burnwati to his residence or wherever he wishes to go to. And the Chamber would like to inform the parties that after we return from the short break, the Chamber will hold a hearing to hear the response from the defense team to the rebuttal made by the co-prosecutors in relation to the key document presentation concerning the role of the accused made by the defense team for Khieu Samphan. The Chamber will take a break now and resume at 20 to 11 to continue our proceedings. The court is now in recess.